Stories.
Okay, we are ready to go.
All right, so welcome. Okay, I call the March 13th or 14th or Pi Day Strategic Plan Update Task Force meeting to order. Tonight we have 14 task force members present. I don't believe, are there any excused absences?
Nope, not tonight.
Okay, great. And then with that, we're gonna just do a quick check to see if there's anyone from the public who would like to make comments.
There is no one online. And there are only staff members in the audience currently.
Okay, and now we have 15 task force members present. Okay, so with that, I think we're clear with public comments. So let's see, I think next on, approval of minutes. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. So I invite everyone to take a moment to scan the minutes that are part of the agenda packet to see if there's any, to make sure they are aligned with your recollection of the minutes of the meeting last time. Okay, as we've scanned the minutes, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, good. And I have a second. Okay, now we can have some discussion. Does anyone would anyone like discussion on the minutes or request any changes to be made? Okay. And with that, so no further discussion. Do we need to take a vote here, Dale?
No.
No, not here. Okay, so I think if there are no objections, we can consider the minutes of the February 29th meeting approved. And so with that, we can move on to our first major agenda item for the day, which is welcome and framing for Mayor Polly. And
Thank you, Chair. I'm just almost giggly tonight coming into this room and looking at faces. I wanted to be at your first meeting. I apologize. I wasn't able to make it. And I had a little foggy brain, so I'm really glad that Wally was able to come and correct some of my mistakes in my written comments that I wrote when I had my 102-degree fever. But here I am. And one of the reasons I'm so excited is because task force are something we just started to use as a community and an administration a few years ago. And it's such a great way to broaden the number of community voices that can get in to one of these big conversations right now. So I look around the table, and Kate, you're the only one I didn't get to hug or say hi. And I see a very diverse group of voices, from those that work in the community to living in the community, different neighborhoods, different demographics, different experiences. And I am so grateful that, my 30 years in this community, this is one place where people put their hands up really fast to volunteer. So thank you for doing this. This is one of those short-term assignments, but really significant to the city. We didn't have a strategic plan prior to 6 years ago. The council worked on it for 18 months with the community and the administration. Andrea, Emily was here for the vote. Emily Noon, our public works director, was captaining the ship at that time, and a lot of work went into this first plan. And I feel like a lot of community voice and a lot of community heart went into this first plan. Yeah, the surveys and the touch points we've had since then show us that many of the themes that were in this original plan are still those things that are most important in the community, but a lot of stuff has changed. So I appreciate that you have all decided to give up your time with your family, your friends, your hobbies, TV time to come here and dive in very deep. One last thing I'd like to leave you with is that you're here not just because of the contributions you've made or the contributions you want to make to the community. You're here to do this gut check of whether or not we're doing what you see in the surveys and the functional plans our community wants us to do. You're here because I think you can give us this fabulous meeting months. And that the original plan that we created will be updated and refreshed, because life is different today. And it will make sense to the 40,000 people that live in this community, to the thousands of business owners who bring it. Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to hang around for the first 30 minutes, but I have one more meeting today. And I think the last thing I want to do is thank you to all the staff that came tonight. You know, these are daytime job people, and they are here tonight so that they can provide their expertise for you all in understanding at a very high level the functional plans that guide a lot of the work they do. So Andrea and all of the team, and Dale, our fabulous staff lead for this event, thank you for coming tonight and helping this group. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mayor Polly. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Richley. Sorry I missed the last meeting as well. I was ill. So tonight I'm going to be going over how we'll engage in our meetings going forward. It's important that we learn how to communicate, right? So if you have any comments after that, we can look at it as well. But here's how we'll pretty much engage. We want to look into leaning into discomfort. So it's how we grow, right? So be okay to be uncomfortable. Be okay to be thinking out of your box. Also, take space and share space. Leave room for everybody to contribute. We have a big room of great minds, and like Mayor Polly said, diverse backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, different financial backgrounds, everything you could think of, we're all in this room. So take space and share space. Be open, authentic, and honest. Communication directly with others in ways that promotes understanding, invites relationships, and builds trust. You know, we got to trust each other as a task force to get initiatives done, you know, in this amount of time that we have. And then also be curious, be okay to ask questions, be curious with the learner's mindset, you know, want to come in with the intention to learn and be curious in what we do. So don't make assumptions and position yourself as a learner. Recognize that everyone has their own identities, histories, and perspectives. That's the effect, the way they experience the workplace and society more broadly. We recognize that differentiating experiences can exist with each other in the same space. So again, we're all from the same different backgrounds, different age groups, different, you know, ethnicities and everything. We all want to come together as one task force. Center BIPOC experiences, decenter whiteness. Again, we're all from a diverse background for a reason. You know, be open to others, you know, perspective and their background and their history, where they may be coming from, because that's also going to allow us to grow as a group and lead to success of the task force initiative again. Confidentiality. Hold what happens in a small group discussion confidential, and do not share with other stories without permission. So again, we ask for confidentiality while we're going through this. If something is said in this room, we want to try to keep it as best as possible in room, so then we're not spreading rumors around town, or, hey, did you hear about this? Or, hey, if you have questions and you want to share, feel free to ask, you know, staff or one of us, vice chair or chair Pretty. And then equality of voice, using, so what we thought of, if you would like to make a comment after anytime we're presenting in any of these meetings, we'd ask that you would just turn your tap like that. If you'd like to speak, I'll take note, or turn it up, sorry. Turn it up, I'm even doing it wrong. Turn it up so that I would know who's going to speak. I'll keep track of who puts theirs up first, so it gives equal time for everybody to share. And that's pretty much it, you know, using the name tags upright to speak so that we can mindful of who's getting the most time as well. Any questions, any additional comments on that?
Well said.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
I was gonna say, it would be a great time.
Yes. All right,
Bishop, test.
back to you, Chairperson. Oh, you got one? Oh, there you go.
So this is a recorded meeting.
Yes.
There's any confidentiality. Do we understand like what time the homeroom covers and all that?
My understanding, so in thinking about, these two brought these forward. I think it's mostly like, don't share someone else's story. So if someone else tells you something personal, don't share that. Invite them to share that with the group.
It's mainly with ourselves, with our group. So if something,
Small group session.
yeah, this session's being recorded. Good question. So it mainly is about if somebody shares something personal about their experiences at their work, like where I work. If I share something about what we do financially through our credit union, I'd ask that it just stay within the group, not outspread and, in the public. They are recorded, but yes, that was a good question. Thank you. Any other? Looks good. I'll turn it over to Chair Prady.
All right, Ashley, Chris, it's back to you for that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Question.
Icebreaker.
Yeah.
So tonight we'd like to start with an icebreaker question. Tonight's question is, what's keeping you up at night or what's distracting you? Right? Nobody has those, right? So
About Issaquah?
anything, it could be anything on your mind. What's keeping you up at night?
So what I would recommend is whoever goes first,
Yeah.
horns it and names someone else to go next, and then we'll all get covered that way.
Or are we sharing this like not in small group, but
You could
in
share with the big group. Yeah.
You should start. That would be great.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
start.
start.
I think, yes, so my what's keeping me up is was my inspiration for the icebreaker today. Because today is the day UW is supposed to announce admissions decisions, and I have a senior who's anxiously waiting at home, and I am anxiously waiting with her from here. That's keeping me up. Yeah, and I'll toss it over to Jason.
Okay. What's keeping me up about Issaquah or just in general? Well, this week we just submitted a bunch of bids and now I have to wait and see which ones were accepted. And they're big bids, so they can keep us busy quite a while. So I think we're in good shape, but once you submit them, you can never get them back. So you always got to second guess yourself. Was that number right? Should I move that? And then one thing that caught my eye here was I was looking through our packet for this, and it mentioned Old Town being part of our focus for more growth. That keeps me up at night because I live down there. And I'm a little concerned because I have to escape from Old Town from 3 to 6. It feels like a prison sometimes.
Hey, Colin. The next, you can tag the next person.
Oh, tag Randy. Great.
Easy, Ukraine. I believe that the history of tyrants is that they tell you what they're going to do beforehand, and they tell you how they're going to do it, and we're confronted with that. And I'm extremely concerned about the precedent.
Can I give a more cerebral answer?
Andy tag.
Oh, are we just going around? I am an attorney and I have a very large trial that is happening that starts on Monday and goes, it's a 5-day trial, Monday through Friday. And I have been up most nights this week, going through exhibits and prepping questions and prepping my opening. Bright and early on Monday morning. So, yeah.
You have a card?
Can I ask if it's civil or criminal?
The special education administrative law trial. Oh, so for a very, very sick.
Very easy.
Yeah. For a very sick child, and hopefully we can get them some services. I represent parents. So, good luck. Yeah. All right, we're just gonna go around.
All right. Let's see. Well, confidentiality, but my wife Nori and immigration, weirdly. Specifically, we have a problem right now with the immigration law in the country that states that a company that has had layoffs within the last 6 months is not able to file for extensions of H-1Bs and that sort of thing. I have a number of people on my team that are now in the very likely scenario that they're going to have to leave the country with families, kids, like they've been here for years because the company won't stop letting people off. It's, yeah, that's what keeps me up at night.
Thank you, Chairman.
Let's see,
Take a couple more.
Okay, well, I'm gonna bring everybody, to a older place of concern about bathrooms. And what I mean by that, there's a little larger idea here. There's a lot of, public restrooms that are closed because of vandalism. If you're a walker, if you're a dog walker, you know, I don't know what's up with that. It seems like every time you turn around, there's a bathroom that's closed. You're walking a dog. We know the dog has to go to the bathroom, but humans need facilities too. But also the larger picture of vandalism, graffiti, which does not seem to be a big problem right now. That's something that I think a lot about. But particularly the bathrooms. Are there people just breaking bathrooms? Fun?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah.
just a little connection here. Katie's mom is always texting me that. She's a runner.
Yeah.
And I also, it's not just an old person issue, it's also a potty training toddler issue. Because if you need a bathroom, you need it like 5 seconds ago.
Right, TJ, call another.
Oh,
call.
okay, well, we bring into bathrooms. Throw it over to Victoria.
I think, so what keeps me up at night is I have a number of different things that I'm on the city council. I work for a startup and I'm a mom to 2 young kids. And so I think I just sort of go through the Rolodex of people that I know I should have gone back to about different things and trying to make sure that I have done all the things that I needed to do with those different parts. Like, so that's what keeps me up at night. I'll have to
I think what's keeping me up at night, I mean, I think it's mostly over the hump at this point, but figuring out my pivot to international relations. So that'll be a really great pivot.
Maybe there's somebody
What-
that can help. With
Yeah.
the pivot.
Yeah, so it's what's keeping me up at night for a while. I'll pass it over to Jane.
I leave at 1 a.m. on Saturday morning for my belated honeymoon, so.
Yeah.
The stressful part, like the trip itself is not that stressful. We're leaving our dog for the longest we've ever left her. And my wife is the one that is very distraught, but it's also, that's the thing for me.
Where are you going on your honeymoon?
Layover in Taiwan where an old buddy lives, and then Vietnam and Cambodia.
Oh.
Yeah, so that'll be fun, but we're in the lead up, not right there.
Yeah.
And then I'll pass it over to Colin.
Oh, thanks. The thing that keeps me up at late at night is the caffeine that I had at 4 o'clock. Somehow I've gotten old. These things affect me, so I have to be more careful. Scott?
Aging loved ones. I just lost my mother about 5 months ago. And then my wife's mom is 92. She lives in Florida, so we're flying her every month to go see her as her health deteriorates. And then my father is 88 and he's getting up there, but he's, so it's just, you think about your kids and all the stuff that you want, getting them into college and after college, getting them a job. And then on the flip side is you gotta take care of your parents afterwards. And I guess I wasn't prepared for that. I have been over the last 10 years, but that's what's on my mind.
All right, I sleep like a baby. Not my babies though, because they didn't sleep very well. Let's see, the thing that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about lately is housing. And digging into statistics of just like how many houses exist, how many families exist, and they don't match. And it explains a lot when you dig into the details of that. And I think it drives a lot of potential solutions as well. So excited to get deeper into that as well. You go.
I win.
You win.
Mayor Foley and myself.
Ooh, thanks, Adam. What keeps me up at night is will you guys all get along and have great conversations? Kidding. You guys are doing wonderful. I love this question. For me right now, new grandmother, relatively new grandmother, it's the flus and colds that have just sort of impacted not only my house, but my grandson, my son, and just how long it's taking everybody. So they've been sleeping at our house, which is one of the reasons for. That's what I'm thinking about at night. Yes.
Yep. All right, I'll finish up. So speaking of kids, I have a daughter that's currently going to school in Arizona and college, and then I've got a sophomore in high school. So they keep me up at night because how expensive they're getting, because I got to get ready to take on another driver on our insurance, and it's going to go up another $300. And all my insurance agent goes, congratulations, the extra stress. So looking forward to that and teaching her how to drive. And then my oldest keeps me up at night because she's now ahead of schedule to graduating, which is not a bad thing, but now she's trying to figure out she wants to be a teacher. So she did a rotation today at PCMS for student teaching. So she's trying to come back to Washington to be a teacher, but I kind of had a conversation too, with the competitiveness and whatnot, but I'm sure she's going to get through it. So that's what keeps me up at night right now. It's like, what is she going to do after the college stuff?
I have a sophomore too.
Yeah.
Yep. But Dale. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I was gonna say, Kelly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you all. There was like 1 minute when it went out. Also, hi. I didn't know if it's showing up, if my face is like really big on the screen.
Yeah,
That's
you
like,
can
okay.
see you.
Okay, hi. Yeah, what keeps me up at night? I would say macro level climate change. And I think at a more recently, the thing that I've been thinking about is with the melting polar ice in Greenland, essentially like decreasing the density of seawater in the North Atlantic, that could really screw up the ocean currents, which would have really bad downstream effects. So yeah, that's a, fun thing to think about.
I will end us on a slightly more local, but +1 to that, Kelly. My dog got in a bad accident this week.
Oh.
And he is just a big goof, and seeing him hurt is, who knew? My heart, which I've always thought to be somewhat cold, was just so melted by his inability to communicate with me, my inability to understand him. Yeah, so just keeping me, I'm not up at night because he's now pretty well sedated with gabapentin, but so he's sleeping very well. But it's replaying in my mind. It's never good with the dogs, Jamie. We gotta worry about them. Awesome. Well, thank you all for that icebreaker question.
Yes, thank you.
It's so interesting to see, well, we have in common, shared experiences, and so, yeah, appreciate you all playing along. And now next up on the agenda is Dale to talk about the purpose, goals, and objectives of the task force.
I'm gonna be as brief as I can be because we've got a brain trust in the room that I don't want to hold you back from too long. So our agenda for this evening, I'm gonna remind us a little bit of our purpose and objectives, and then Stephen Padua is gonna walk us through a brief overview of the comprehensive plan with a chance for questions from this group. Then we will have what I'm calling the movie trailer version of all of our functional plans led by the incredible staff here in the room tonight. Following that, we'll do a bit of a functional plan deep dive. And maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. Our goal areas are set up a little bit differently tonight. And there will be some reason behind that, which I will reveal. But also, if you read the packet, you already know the reveal. But we'll get some time to break out into small groups to learn more about the functional plans as they feed into our goal areas. From that, we'll come back, and in those groups that you broke out into, you'll share back, what are the themes that you heard from the plans, and what is it making you think as we look ahead to our next meeting, where we will be revising objectives in the strategic plan. So that is the agenda for this evening. A quick reminder before I turn it over is just the objectives of this group in particular. We've got two main things that we're driving at. One is at the end of our 5 meetings that you all are able to provide recommendations on revisions to the objectives and proposed actions within each of the goal areas of the strategic plan. This might include also some revision to the background section. There was great feedback. I don't know if you didn't take the posters home and put them up in your guest bedroom and read them over, but great feedback on the way that the background and context has shifted. And recommendations about what further community engagement around the update should look like. Where are we? We are at meeting 2, March 14th, Pi Day. On our last meeting, we were really starting to set the table, and tonight is a little bit more. It's like we're putting a little bit more cutlery on the table, maybe that fancy, this sort of fancy soup spoon, but continuing to understand the functional plans that feed into the strategic plan, the progress we've made on those plans, what the current work looks like, and what the near-term future work also looks like. Then when we come together next time on April 4th, unfortunately not an exciting day. I looked back and I was like, oh, and we're gonna miss May the 4th too. I was like, oh, we could have done all themed. It would have been great. But when we come back together on April 4th, the real focus that night is going to be beginning to actually revise the objectives. So you're really thinking tonight about what information do you need to feel comfortable and confident coming into the 4th with some ideas about revisions to those objectives. That might mean replacing objectives. It might mean adding objectives. It might mean, in some cases, narrowing the scope of the objectives. There was some great feedback from our last meeting about the scope on this objective just seems way bigger than 5 or 7 or even 20 years. How do we narrow this to have it be something that we can measure progress towards? I was going to give some reminders about how we want to engage. I actually think Chris did an incredible job. And so I'm not sure I have a lot to add here, but just a reminder that there's no one right way to do this. We have folks in here that use strategic plans consistently in their work. We have people at this little U that literally write strategic plans for their job. And we have folks that may have never seen a strategic plan before this one. There's no one right way to do this. And I would invite us to take Mayor Pauly's words to heart. You're here for a reason. You're here for the lived experiences and perspectives that you bring. Have that guide the way that you engage in the input that you give. So again, tonight, it's all about building a better understanding of the overall planning landscape of the city. It's all about understanding the functional plans that flow into this nearer term strategic plan. And then when we come back together on April 4th, we're going to be discussing and workshopping objectives within the strategic plan. Before I turn it over to Stephen, are there any questions before we dive in? Heck yeah, thanks, Randy.
This may not be relevant, but is there going to be any discussion or information given to us about the State Growth Management Act and how that affects us?
It's like a perfect segue. Yeah, but before we call Stephen up here to explain, are there any other questions? And then maybe I'll have Randy state his question again and Stephen can appear. Suddenly. Okay, super. Well, there's no better way. Oh, Scott.
There we go.
Just real quick, I mean, you had set us up into like functional groups later on. Should we, within those functional groups, kind of focus more on that piece that these people are going to be talking to us about? I know that we're supposed to think about all of it, but more so on just what they're doing.
I would invite you to think about all of them for now. And I'm going to give a look. I think seems like Scott might have read the packet and saw my instructions. You're going to break out into groups with sort of subsets of the functional plans, and you'll collect everyone else's questions. If that feels like a lot and you're like, I just want to focus on just a couple, that's totally fine. But I would encourage you to be generative in your question creation. Okay, I'm gonna change PowerPoint slides and invite Stephen to come up here.
Thank you, Dale. Hi, everyone. It's Stephen, the Long Range Planning Manager. And great. So many of you have seen this presentation before. I've gone to many of the boards commissions to talk about the comprehensive plan. We are coordinating with many of the boards commissions to talk about the comprehensive plan for the elements, for your respective elements that you were contributing feedback on. The biggest thing to know about the comprehensive plan, it's required by the state. And that is from the Growth Management Act, requires the development of these 20-year planning documents we call the comprehensive plan. And the purpose of these documents is to address sprawl, population growth, and the quality of life in many of our communities, something that wasn't previously done in a consistent manner prior to the 1990 Growth Management Act. The other thing that's required by GMA, the Growth Management Act, is to address multiple different topics that are represented in our elements in the comprehensive plan. So for your boards commissions, it could be the Transportation Advisory Board, it could be the Parks Board, it could be Planning Policy Commission talking land use and housing. So we have been coordinating with many of the boards commissions to talk through how to update a lot of these topics. These are the primary topics that are required to go into the comprehensive plan. The two that aren't required, human services element and the cultural arts and culture element. City of Issaquah has actually chosen to add that into the comprehensive plan to make sure we address that with our population growth.
Yeah, good question. Isn't the environmental, isn't there an?
I'm gonna get into that later. Yeah, no. So
Seems something missing.
right now, if you go back one slide, right now, this is what's required. But there's been new legislation that is now requiring certain updates to our comprehensive plan, which is, I'll talk about later, a new environmental element that we're introducing this round. Can we move on?
Oh,
Third question.
nope, there's not a question. It just kicked me out, so it'll pull it right back up. Give me a second.
Okay. So with the updates to each of the elements, we are working with a lot of the boards commissions to talk about how best to address different levels of new legislation coming from the state as well as from the county, as well as how best we want to try to approach implementation. So there's this balancing act of conversations of how do we want to move forward on achieving a certain level of vision. And when it comes to updating the comprehensive plan, the state requires two different types of updates. We're allowed to update no more than once a year, which are optional. And typically they're minor updates. And then we are required to do a periodic update every 10 years. And that is, we have to update every element in the comprehensive plan every 10 years. And we are currently in that periodic update right now. In the next slide, please. So in terms of how this document works, and we use this planning framework to help explain how the comprehensive plan kind of fits in with everything else. The comprehensive plan contains the city's vision for a lot of these topics. And through that vision, we develop goals and policies to kind of give some direction on how we want to approach transportation or land use or housing. And for implementation, that's where the functional plans actually come in. And in the functional plans, you discuss a lot of strategies, you put together actions and consider resources and how you want to implement many of those actions or even the timing of those actions. Then it kind of feeds into the citywide strategic plan, or how we've kind of have it set up. And further implementation, kind of less than 5 years, you look at financing implementation through the city budget, as well as through our city regulations represented in our municipal code. And then you can get lower into the detailed level of programs and projects, as well as then you're looking at performance measures. How are we doing? And then the cycle goes back up to the conference plan to see how well we're doing over time to achieve that vision. And if we need to make certain updates to either any of the goals or policies or even the vision as our community continues to change over time. I'm going to talk on this briefly because we have this great brain trust over here that's going to talk a little more detailed on each of the functional plans. But the main thing to talk about is these are the primary functional plans that help influence this periodic update of the conference plan. And that being because a lot of these are required topics in the conference plan, we use a lot of the more recent updates to the functional plans to kind of direct us with the comp plan update. The biggest message I want to make between the conference plan and the functional plans is they have overlaps between the goals and policies. So you develop the goals and policies in the conference plan in line with the vision, and then you use those goals and policies to help put together your implementation plan, being your functional plans where you develop strategies, actions, and evaluate a lot of your resources. So our process for adopting the comprehensive plan, kind of follows this little flow. We talked through a lot of the boards, commissions, talked through most of the topics or elements that we're updating for the periodic update. And the board and commission recommendations go to the Planning Policy Commission, who then make a recommendation to City Council for adoption. There's three big themes for the periodic update right now. The first big one is compliance with state and county regulations that have changed. There's a lot of new legislation that we've had to consider the last couple of years that are really changing how we want to look at growth for a lot of the topics or the elements. There's coordination. We've developed, just in the last 5 years, we've developed multiple different functional plans, which now puts together strategies and how we want to achieve a lot of the vision for the comprehensive plan. And so we want to make sure that we're using consistent language as well as consistent direction on the policies that are being put in the comprehensive. And lastly is design. The comprehensive plan, if you try to look it up right now, is a little clunky. And we want to make it a little more user-friendly on not only just accessing, but also using. Because if there's a lot of overlap between the functional plans as well as our regulations, we want to make sure we can make that direct connection as you're accessing the comprehensive plan. Our timeline, we're currently in the far left green area where we're putting together the draft plan, and we're aiming for adoption of the comprehensive plan by December this year. So I can go into questions now.
Who do you hand this into at the state?
It goes, Department of Commerce does our final, I guess I'll call certification of our comprehensive plan, but it also goes through the regional planning body, PSRC, Puget Sound Regional Council, who actually reviews everything and certifies in accordance to the county and state regulations.
I had a similar question to that, just to expand upon it a little bit. We talk a lot about feedback coming from sort of inside of Issaquah with our boards and all that. Is there additional feedback other than just certification that comes from the state level? Outside?
Yeah, so we also coordinate with a lot of external agencies where we are going through that process right now of getting feedback from Fish and Wildlife, Washington DOT, talking with neighboring cities, talking with, I'm trying to remember who we just talked to, Snoqualmie tribes, and making sure that we're getting comments from a lot of the external agencies we're coordinating with, and that any of our planning has impact on.
The periodic update that we're on at the moment, is there a requirement on the breadth of the changes that need to be applied? Outside of attaching to regulation, can you go and put a comma somewhere and say we updated it? Or is there a level that is expected from us to produce out of this process?
We have to comply with certain regulations. So a good example is we have to go into level of detail of providing level of service for certain utilities. And that's required by the state. And so Department of Commerce, Puget Sound Regional Council will look at what we have in our proposed plan to make sure that we're complying with those regulations.
Bill, can you go back to this slide real quick?
Gladly.
And while it's fun, my question was, this would, if you took it literally, suggest that the functional plans are informing the strategic plan, which I think is more complicated than that. Right?
Yes, this is a very simple graphic kind of showing the flow. It doesn't necessarily work this way.
Could you talk a little bit though about the interplay between strategic plan, what we're working on, and the functional plans and the comprehensive plan, how those might fit together? I think that's something I'd be interested in your thoughts on how you see those three kind of pieces fitting.
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of what we talked about with the comprehensive plan, it really is that vision. And you break it up by goals and policy areas that kind of guide some of those different elements. Then when you get to the functional plans, you get a little more strategy involved in terms of, okay, well, we want to make the city connected everywhere. What does that mean? And then you look at different areas of the city of what that means for those different areas, what kind of resources that kind of go into it. When you get to the strategic plan, you kind of have to now apply some type of either prioritization or some type of decision-making matrix or whatever you want to call it that helps inform what is the priority for investment, because all these different functional plans, they have, you know, unlimited, or they're not unlimited, but limited lists, large lists of projects based on those strategies. But we don't have the resources to be able to invest in them now. So now you have to get into that level of prioritization to now say, these are what we want to fund over, we'll say, the next 5 years in accordance to the strategic plan. And then that becomes kind of a cycle of decision-making that you go through with every budget or every annual work plan, where you're looking at different regulations you want to change, or programming or projects you want to pursue. And some of that comes with opportunity with grants or other additional resources that come into play. Maybe there's a regional factor that comes into play that changes some of why we might want to do another infrastructure project a little sooner. So there's that, it creates this cycle of decision-making that you want to do that helps with prioritizing different levels of projects or even programs.
That's first member Randy.
Steve, where does public safety fit into this? I don't see it up there. And specifically, one of the reasons, aside from the obvious, the cops and crime rate and things, wildfires. The city has been very clear that we're on the boundary, and that the forest, and frankly, I've been told by the chief of Eastside Fire and Rescue that it's potentially catastrophic. Where would safety and that kind of safety, not just cops, but be in the plan?
So one thing I just want to make, the functional plans that are listed here are not all the functional plans the city has. Okay, so just to help answer that question a little bit, what's listed here is really just what's influenced from the comprehensive plan. Public services or public safety it's in what we call the capital and public, or utilities and public services element, but it's a very minor portion because it's not an actually required piece of the comprehensive plan. And so we actually address it externally from the comprehensive plan through other planning means.
Okay, sure, thank you.
And then emergency management's another one.
Chair Pretty.
Yes. So I think we've talked before, you've presented to the equity board before. And so I know as an element, equity doesn't show up. I know equity is considered one of the values underneath the city's strategic plan. So can you speak a little bit to how equity considerations have flown into the comprehensive plan? I know one possible way could be like community engagement, to making sure you've engaged with diverse communities, but how does that fit into how the plan is structured?
That's actually a really great question, because that's one of the required components with the comprehensive plan update with several of the elements. And so we've been looking at a lot of policy updates in accordance to now what's required of us. One of the things with the housing element, for example, is we had to complete a racial disparate impact analysis. And we use that to help influence newer policies to put into the housing element, as well as help inform some of what we look at in terms of like housing inventory, but also historical impacts on housing in Issaquah. So that's something that we look at, and the same can be said for several of the elements in terms of like what we're updating, is trying to incorporate a different lens of equity with the policy updates.
And then just related to that, do you have a sense of how representative the engagement was feeding into this periodic update?
Most of the engagement that we've had has primarily been with boards and commissions. We've done citywide engagement. We had an open house, which Victor, I know you attended last fall, and we had about a dozen people show up to that, and then we got email responses in addition to that. But beyond the discussions we've had with the boards and commissions, we haven't been able to actually have any conversations with any additional groups, either because of lack of responses or people not getting interested in coming to either the events we hold or kind of the public comment periods that we've kind of set.
Thank you.
Let's remember, Scott, did you have a question?
The strategic plan, you said, is that one of our priorities is to prioritize what we're doing. So if if new money comes available, okay, so let's say we have these priorities within housing. And 1 through 5, and new money comes somewhere, new policies change. How, since we haven't done the strategic plan update in the last 6 years, 5 years, something like that, right?
Mhm.
How do we go about, how much fluidity is there in changing the priority? Because it's in the top 5, but it ain't number 1, but now all of these factors have changed in the last couple of years. That now gives it a new priority, and we have to really, how does that work?
So if like, let's say a new grant or some type of funding source comes into play,
Yeah.
then staff actually have a conversation with the administration and then have another conversation with city council on, we now have this available. This wasn't necessarily on our work plan. So we need to make a budget adjustment or some type of adjustment with our work plan to now prioritize that.
And council can do that independently of any work like what we're doing today.
Correct.
Okay.
Because a lot of the strategic plan just builds in some of that flexibility. It provides that framework for decision making, not necessarily that you have to change the strategic plan every time you change a priority.
Okay, I think with that, we probably should move on to the next agenda topic. Stephen, thank you so much for giving this.
Thank you.
overview. And so with that, I think, I guess, I don't know, Dale, do you have a search order?
I do. I'm going to provide us a little bit of framing before we jump in. Thank you. So we got a taste of the comprehensive plan, but now we're going to dive into some previews of the functional plans. Tonight, you're going to have a chance to dive further into those in our sort of small group breakouts after this, but we wanted everyone to get a high level movie preview, blockbuster, really trying to build them up over there, blockbuster presentation of just what are each of these plans about. Now I'm being told to lower expectations. What are these plans about at a high level? This is not meant to be a stand and deliver presentation, but is meant to be a narrative. Mayor Polly really emphasized that she wants you to get a sense of the story of these plans from the folks that are their main stewards. And so the way that this will work, I'm going to go forward and then come back, is that each functional plan steward is going to have about 4 minutes to present out a vision into a little bit of a view into their plan. You have Post-it notes in front of you, and I would encourage you during this time, because we're not going to have time to ask them questions in the same way that we did just now with Stephen. Instead, jot your questions down, and when we move into our breakouts, what you'll do is say you're going to move into the mobility and infrastructure group, but you have a few questions about one of our growth and development, our housing strategy plan. You will drop your questions off in that corner before you head to your corner, so that there's still a chance for someone to get those answers and then bring them back to the group. We simply just don't have enough time, nor do we have, can we really make that ask of this group to come for multiple meetings to tell us about multiple plans? And we also want to lean a little bit into, I don't want to say becoming experts, but I do want to say becoming, just keeps kicking me out of Teams. It really doesn't like me. To lean a little bit into becoming more familiar with 1 or 2 goal areas. So one thing I'll add before we jump in here is I'm going to have us go in a particular order, but I did want to say that so Chief Schwan could not be here with us tonight. She's really sorry that she wasn't able to be here. And we chatted on the phone this afternoon and went back and forth over whether she should pull one of her sergeants, on-duty sergeants, to come and chat. And I said, I'm not sure that's the best use of that sergeant's time, and that I will gather the questions. So I'll be in that corner over there for any questions we have about public safety during that portion of time. But she just wanted to send her best, and her plan is to be here at our next meeting, but she wasn't able to join us tonight. Any questions before we invite our first functional plan reviewer up here? Great, let's go with the master mobility plan. If it doesn't work.
Yeah. Everybody.
My name is Thomas Valdrez. I'm the city's senior transportation planner. I will be giving your blockbuster for the mobility. So basically, it's not going to be super interesting like a movie, but I'll try my best. So as Stephen was showing, we have the comprehensive plan, which contains the transportation element. So transportation element. Oh, thanks very much. I didn't know this was going to be here. It contains the vision, goals, and policies related to transportation. So you can think about that as just ways to make sure that the transportation network is equitable, as well connected, is functional, make sure that facilities are there for everybody who needs it. As we sort of think about the functionality of it, that's where the mobility master plan comes in. It provides the strategies and the actions that specifically will address more of the vision and sort of the high level ideas of what we're hoping to achieve. So, as this filters into the strategic plan, I'll be there in the corner talking about mobility. Those are kind of like what Stephen said, the strategies that will be sort of addressed in the short term, whereas the mobility master plan and comprehensive plan are more of the 20-year over that sort of time period horizon. So yeah, just as we think about, in the near term, some things that we've done since the previous update. The mobility master plan was created in 2020. And so since then, over the last 3 years, we've done a decent amount. We've built some capital improvement projects to address mobility needs. We are currently doing a transit study, looking at ways to improve, transit in the community, and also think long-term towards light rail coming in about 20 years. So that project is wrapping up, hoping to take that to council this month to finalize the light rail guide document. What else? On the horizon, we will be developing a vision and guiding principles for light rail, so that we see that as a prerequisite for any sort of decision making for light rail. We want to have sort of a North Star so that we can see, where we want the community to develop over the next 20 years near a future light rail station, and sort of think about how we would like to see that. And as Sound Transit's project progresses, we'll use that as our North Star to help guide future decision making. Trying to think what other projects I can talk about that might be interesting. Last year, we developed the city's street standards. So that helps, design and construction of roads. So that was a pretty major thing. It hadn't been updated in over 13 years. So that was really great to see. And yeah, we're also updating our neighborhood traffic calming program. So that has not been updated in a while. That is essentially, figuring out ways to improve the livability of streets and neighborhoods, addressing cut through traffic and such. So, we'll be updating, a lot of transportation plans. We have a lot of projects coming up. Mobility is an issue that I think everybody feels every day, especially getting into this meeting tonight. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff we're doing, a lot of work to be done. But overall, yeah, it's an exciting area that I'm happy to talk about after this.
Good. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks.
Keeping it in order of these random blocks up here, Emily Moon, utility plans.
Let's talk sewer.
Yeah. You're lucky you get like the 3-in-1.
I know, so do the math on that, about a minute for each plan. So I'm Emily Moon, I'm the Public Works Director. Happy to be here tonight. We have 3 utility plans. Storm and surface water master plan. We have the water plan. We have a sewer plan. So there's a lot of similar characteristics in these 3 plans. I'm going to talk about storm and surface water first. We just adopted this plan, so that's why it's #1 on my list. updated and adopted in 2023. It guides the city's management of stormwater runoff and flooding, how we handle flooding, and the improvement of our surface water quality and stream habitat. We have a lot of water in town. Manages our drainage, protects and enhances water quality and habitat in creeks. And it also addresses those same sort of things for our end of lakes manage and our connectivity to Puget Sound. So this plan, like all the other plans that I'll talk about, provides an overview of our system. So a lot of that is below ground, but in case of this plan, you actually can see the water as well in the town that this plan addresses. We provide in the plan long-term goals, guides the implementation of studies that we're going to perform over time. The programs and capital projects we'll try to deliver in stewarding that system. And those projects include drainage infrastructure, water quality retrofitting, flow control retrofitting, riparian and stream habitat projects. It also provides the criteria, like we saw on that graphic, for a comprehensive plan element. There are pieces of the elements in capital facilities and of course on utilities that this plan connects to. Plan also responds to state and federal regulations. It's an alphabet soup, but we have a pollution discharge federal law that is addressed by the Storm Management Act, National Flood Insurance Program, Endangered Species Act, just to name a handful. And then the capital projects and also the operating costs that are demonstrated in the plan become the basis for the rates. That's stormwater rate. So like stormwater, we have a water plan. Water plan was last adopted in 2019. It's required to be updated every 10 years. Provides an overview of our system, which, like I said, with the stormwater plan, establishes policy and criteria for a comprehensive plan. Projects our future demands, analyzes the existing system, makes recommendations to correct issues, and recommendations on how to meet future demand needs. Also addresses lots of state and federal regulations. It becomes the how-to for how to operate our system efficiently and effectively, and also becomes the basis for our rates on water. And that plan includes things like supply evaluation, water use and efficiency and conservation, water quality, recommendations on our facilities, operations and maintenance, the emergency management, whole system design. We have a very technical water system, and environmental stewardship. Last one is sewer. Our sewer plan is really old, really old. So it has not been updated in about 20 years. We're in the process right now of updating that plan. It's and I will say it's on the goal line. Getting its final review from some of state agencies that we need to collaborate with on that. It has not yet been finally adopted by the city council, but we've gone through over the course of the last couple of years, really a lot of community engagement on that plan. Covers a lot of the same sort of things: policies, practices, capital facilities, regulations as all the other plans. And it is our how-to guide on how to operate our system as effectively and efficiently as we can, according to all those fun regulations. That is the utility plans in a nutshell.
Awesome. Three for one. Coming in. Keeping it in the mobility and infrastructure family, capital improvement.
Well, I guess if we're using the movie metaphor, the CIP or the capital improvement plan would be a little bit of an anthology Dale, would you mind going back one slide?
I wouldn't. Everyone, Stephen,
Thank
you gotta copyright this.
I wish I could just shift it down slightly. It's right. I live down here. So I'm Susie Mansell. I'm the budget manager with the city and the finance department. So the capital improvement plan, or the CIP, is a plan that we put together every other year. So as Stephen mentioned, one of the issues we run into is how do we pay for all of these priorities? So the CIP really focuses in on just those next 6 years. What are our capital priorities and how do we pay for them? So in this case, capital primarily refers to, I would say, physical infrastructure, as opposed to more of the city services that might be provided in some of these other plans. So we've heard about some of the plans that feed into the CIP, including all 3 of the utility plans. It's going to include the mobility master plan. You will hear about the parks plan, which feeds into it. You'll hear about ICAP, which feeds into it. As well as really any plan that looks at some of our physical infrastructure. I would say the CIP, because of that, addresses all 6 of the city's goals, depending on which project you're looking at. For example, city leadership and services, the CIP will also cover city facilities, such as City Hall, the community center, buildings like that. It will also cover our information technology infrastructure. So those, along with equipment, really, along with those plans that we've talked about, make up the strategic plan, or excuse me, make up the CIP. I should also mention TIP is after CIP over here. That's the Transportation Improvement Program, which our Public Works Department puts together. That is really the transportation subsection of the CIP. So if you pull out transportation, that's really the TIP, but that gets updated every year as opposed to the CIP updated every other year. That's pretty much the CIP.
Excellent. Well, time well spent over there. Next up, we'll go with the Issaquah Climate Action Plan. I know I'm jumping all over. I'm feeling a little, the sun's out. I've got some of that playful sunshine mood. Can't help it.
I'm Stacey Van McIntyre. I'm the sustainability manager for the city and primarily focused on implementing the climate action plan. I was trying to think of soundtrack for the ICAP and like the Apollo 13 came to mind, a little optimism, a little tension, a lot of uncertainty. So that's where we are with the ICAP. You're probably very familiar, the city of Issaquah has a long history of sustainability. And in 2021, we passed our first climate action plan. It's the first plan really focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions as well as climate resilience. It was developed through a 9-month process that really engaged the community and businesses, the environmental board, who was brand new, and developed a series of actions falling within 6 different categories for the city as well as the community to take on. It aligns with the environmental stewardship goal of the strategic plan. It is a 5-year plan. This year, by June, we'll be doing a midpoint check-in with both the environmental board as well as council. We are planning to actually start updating it next year so we can finish that process by spring of 2026 ahead of our next biennial budget process. The plan is really focused on reducing, as I mentioned, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building climate resilience. There are 6 key areas: overarching climate action, buildings and energy, transportation, land use, materials and consumption, and community, natural resource and water resources, and I forgot, and community resilience and well-being. And as mentioned, it does include actions that are intended for the city, for businesses, and the community to take. So it is not just intended for the city to implement. We have a dashboard, thanks to Dale, was really heavily involved in helping us develop that. We update it quarterly and it helps track our progress on implementation. Right now, we have about 60% of our actions in the ICAP are either complete, underway, or planned to be started by the end of the year. We are working with a lot of different departments and community partners on that implementation, and currently working on our budget request to continue implementation in the next biennium. Just wanted to highlight a few of the things that are underway for our municipal operations. We have now transitioned all of our city building electricity to green power just a completed that this a couple months ago. We're assessing our buildings for electrification as well as renewable energy opportunities. Applying for grants for solar installs. We're working on transitioning our fleet as well as our landscaping equipment to electric, installing EV chargers for our fleet. And then working on a community solar project at the community center. And then we also just passed a sustainable purchasing policy for internal purchasing. At the community level, we have a very extensive heat pump incentives program that we're working on through a 5-city partnership, really focused on low income as well as affordable housing households. We anticipate launching additional electrification initiatives this year. We have a clean building program that works on energy efficiency with our commercial buildings as well as the school district and other building owners. And then we are going to be launching a green power push for the community and businesses later this year. So a lot going on within the city. I just wanted to highlight too, we have some really great regional partnerships. We have a partnership across King County through a group called K4C. It's a number of cities as well as the county that partner. And then last year we launched a new partnership with 4 other East Side cities called the East Side Climate Partnership. And we're really working as a team on implementation.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. Keeping it green with Jeff Watling, our Parks Director.
What's that?
I don't know how to say it. I'll take it.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for your involvement. Jeff Watling, Parks and Community Services Director. The Park Strategic Plan, its purpose, really in a nutshell, is to really establish a vision for the stewardship, the maintenance, the management, and the capital investments for your city-owned parks, trails, and open space system. As such a vast system, this plan really, I think, represents a touch on all of the strategic plan areas. Obviously, some are pretty obvious: vital environment, infrastructure, social and economic vitality. But it really has involvement in all of those strategic goals. The plan itself, our current plan, was adopted in 2018. It was really a first of its kind for Issaquah in terms of its approach, rather than typically the state requires, and as Stephen said, the comprehensive plan approach to a park system plan can become very park by park, sort of linear type of a process. The council at the time, and 2 of the council members that are here tonight were part of this, really desire to have a park plan that told more of a system-wide story. What is the vision we want for the entire system? How do we connect that whole system? And so when it was adopted in 2018, the goal is for it to be adopted reviewed and renewed every 6 years. So we are actually started last summer with community engagement. We will be adopting or updating that park plan here later this year. Thank you. A number of you may have responded to our community survey we did last fall. We had about 750 resident responses. We'll have another wave of public engagement here later this spring. So very much a community led, community involved plan and vision. The plan itself really centered around that public engagement that then created themes. Those themes really led to priorities, project priorities. Those project priorities were then given a ranking, not a forced ranking of 1 through 30, but really put into buckets of near-term priority, mid-term priority, long-term priority. This plan, though it's called a strategic plan, and very much is a system plan, in that it has a longer 20+ year sort of vision we're trying to cast out or put out. Those near-term priorities that I were mentioning really became, and nice that Susie went just before me, those near-term priorities become the basis for the capital improvement plan, the 6-year CIP, the park elements of that 6-year CIP. So it's a way that this functional plan feeds right into the CIP and that council engagement there. Progress that's been made, yes, absolutely. Even as our community has weathered a global pandemic, there's a lot of work that system plan has helped to inform. Some pretty strategic acquisitions that have been made. One of the really goals and priorities of the park plan was creating a city system, a city park system, but also a park system that really serves as the gateway into the public lands around us. So some really big acquisitions were informed by this plan. The Bergsma acquisition on Cougar Mountain, another 20-acre strategic piece on Squawk Mountain called Squawk Valley Estates. 20 acres was purchased. Some really strategic partnered acquisitions with DNR on West Tiger. So acquisitions have really been informed by this plan. Some operational goals that have been met. Really the basis for Green Issaquah, really a very successful volunteer program has been informed by that plan, as well as our launch into urban forestry has been informed by the recently, you're going to see some capital projects that are going to be happening here this year that have all been informed by the park plan as well. Neighborhood park renovation at Hillside Park, a really exciting investment we're going to be doing in the Old Town area around Pedestrian Park and the Senior Center, and really a first phase of really unifying all that public land that could really support Front Street and Old Town. We're also going to be constructing a dog park where the old skate park used to be, if you know where that is, down by the Rainier Trail. That old skate park area will now become an off-leash dog area, which is really exciting. The park plan also set a vision for how we really tell our story as a community through art. So some exciting things like Jacob Two Trees also was very much informed by this park strategic plan. So fun overview. I look forward to questions later.
Great. Staying in the family of environmental stewardship and growth and development, we need Dollywall to talk about our housing strategy.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see different boards and commissions and council members. This is my favorite part, to see community members in action. Housing action plan. So this was adopted in 2017. I was not with the city at the time. My understanding is it was a pretty robust community outreach. Community members fed into what the strategy should be for the city for housing. As it was a desirable place to live, we want to maintain and improve the quality of life here. So that sort of framework informed what are some strategies we want to focus on for the next few years, and came up with 9 strategies. I want, we'll get into the details as we get into the tables and more detailed discussion, but I'll take one example because I think one of the questions was, how does this fit in with the comp plan and all that? So the city has to plan for their fair share of the region's growth. So that, we get our own numbers in terms of how much should we plan for our utilities infrastructure. You heard about that. You heard about, other things that come with housing, impact to schools. So how are we planning for that growth? Happens at the comprehensive plan level. So that's the state mandated portion. We're looking 20 years out. We're going to grow by these numbers. We should have water, sewer, utilities, schools to serve that kind of population. When we come to the strategies piece, we're talking about at the comprehensive plan, we'll say the goal is to achieve a variety of housing types. The policy is to promote these different types of housing types, say townhomes. We want more townhomes, so we'll have a policy to promote those through programs, through regulations, through funds. All of those 3 things can inform some of the implementation. But at the implementation, the housing strategies plan, we get deeper into it, and the time frame is shorter. So one way to think of the comprehensive plan is a 20-year plan. The housing strategy is more like a 5-year plan. What do we focus on in the next 5 years? So one strategy, the top one, is we're going to remove barriers to building accessory dwelling units. So then we get into how do we do that? How do we remove these barriers? We don't charge impact fee for ADUs, for instance. So city council vets out those policies and regulations related to that particular strategy. What we've done since 2017 to implement this plan is the Department of Commerce handed out some grant money. We went after it. We got about $100,000 to study three of these strategies. One was to increase developer-provided affordable housing in Central Issaquah, strategy number 6. Another strategy was to figure out what is deterring condominiums to be built here. The third one was how do we increase diversity of housing types? And the approach we took with that was to really have a more data-driven decision-making, really understanding what are the barriers from an economic standpoint. So we hired Eco Northwest as a firm that did some of that analysis. So instead of taking what we required for affordable housing, that wasn't really, well, is it working? Is it not working? What's the development feasibility for those? So they looked at all that data and gave us some information that the policymakers then can use that information to come up with, we want to go here with the policy. So it's really an implementation of the bigger vision and goal that we have for housing and for a shorter period of time in a more strategic kind of way. Here's how we're going to implement it. And I think I'm probably over my time, but I'll end it up with, there's one strategy about transit-oriented development. We're sitting close to this project up here. Andrew Snyder's in the room. I think the resilience of, because it was in this housing strategies program, a lot of focus from the city happened to make sure that project didn't die, that we kept on persisting, and now King County Housing Authority owns it. It takes a lot to get it built in the ground. I think today we issued the permit for the cell tower to be relocated on a city-owned park, because that was a barrier to getting that project built, because there are 5 cell tower companies. So it really gets into, it provides a direction for the city to provide resources in that direction. Thank you. I've probably exceeded my time.
You did, but every once in a while you need a longer movie preview. You just need to see a little bit more of it, and that's totally worth it. As we head to this next corner, Monica Negrilla with our Human Services Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Dale. Good evening, everyone. My name is Monica Negrilla. As Dale said, I'm the Human Services Manager here at the city. So nice to see familiar faces and new faces. Nice to meet you, those that I didn't have a chance to meet. So as the title says, Human Services, I'm here to talk a little bit about the Human Services Strategic Plan, which is a 5-year initiative that was created in 2021 and adopted by City Council in 2022. This was our first attempt at creating a human services focused strategic plan. And the purpose of that plan was really threefold. One, it informs the community priorities in human services for the next 5 years. It guides the city investments in human services, and then it provides a roadmap for any policy decisions related to human services. Often I get asked, what is human services? And often people say, is this human resources? It's not. We really focus primarily on the social service needs in the community and challenges. So if you will, we don't have the previous slide up, but I'm always thinking about the Issaquah demographics and our population. You know, Issaquah having about 40,000 community members and residents. Our bulk of work really focuses on the 7.8% that live in poverty, often come with additional challenges in terms of disabilities and other disproportionate inequities. So with that in mind, kind of like what are some of the strategic goal areas that, as Dale said, that are impacted by, or that kind of like how does the Human Services Strategic Plan flow into the broader city-wide strategic plan? So it falls into the social and economic vitality goal. And I think that's it about that part. In terms of the development of the plan, some of the equity considerations that we took on early on were really to look at our demographic in our community. And so we started, as I said, looking at what does Issaquah look like, who are the most impacted community members. And then we analyzed that data and understood that there's a wide disproportionate number of community members who live in poverty and don't have their needs met. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit over almost nearly 8% of our population lives in poverty. But as we started analyzing that data, we learned that the majority of people living in poverty are non-white. So that really informed our community engagement process throughout the development of the plan. We went intentionally and identified and had focus groups and interviews with those pockets of our population to really better understand the needs. And that also informed our the creation of our strategic plan and priorities. So with that, the themes that we identified through that community engagement process, we summarized them in 4 different categories, areas. We focused on physical and behavioral health needs. That was one of the needs that came up as really prevalent in this population. Stable housing, which we identified both as homelessness, addressing homelessness, and preventing homelessness or affordable housing. Language access and cultural services. And then the 4th we identified was just broader community resources, which could be affordable childcare or legal services, mediation services, and so forth. Of course, basic needs, food, clothing, that's also included. So what progress have we made and where we are in the strategic plan? As mentioned, it was adopted in 2022. So we are now at a 2-year mark. We are just completed a small review. It is a 5-year strategic plan, so it's not set to be completely reviewed and revised until 2026, 2027. However, because we created this plan at the height of the pandemic in 2021, we really wanted to pause at a 2-year mark and really get back in touch with the community and see if we are still on track. So we just had a small review in the last couple of months on that. Some of the highlights and some of the progress that we made, a lot of work has been made, but some of the highlights include responding to homelessness in our community through targeted homeless outreach services, creating services in Issaquah that respond and connect people to needed services, whether it's behavioral health services or shelter services, and creating resources in the community. We also made a lot of progress in connecting further with various cultural groups that historically the city has not been connecting with, whether that means community members whose English is not their first language, or different racial demographics, different disabilities, and so forth. And a lot of work continues to be done. We also, a large body of our work has been supporting our police department and providing human services in collaboration with the police department. So those will continue to be our priorities for the next few years as all of these needs continue to exist in our community. And so with that, I think I look forward to questions later on. Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, our freshest plan. I believe, yeah, went into this packet as under consideration.
In order to understand my audience, this question is not for anybody who knows about economic development, but what do you think about when you think about economic development?
Value money.
Boom. Okay. So usually I hear like giving money away, and that's not what we do in economic development. I wish we had a ton of money to give to businesses. We can't, our state constitution does not allow. But so our economic development plan, we are a new department in 2012, and we created our first economic development plan soon after that, and it was a 3-year plan. And right after that, the city did its first strategic plan. And so we were going to update our economic development plan in 2020. Yeah, that didn't happen, right? So we're now a division of the mayor's office, and we updated our economic development plan last year. As she said, our newest plan, it was adopted in January of this year. So we're almost done with everything we put in there. But the strategy that we're in our strategic plan, as you mentioned, is social and economic vitality. But the topics that we address, economic development is really about creating a good business climate for people to be able to do business. And provide the amenities and the services that all of you and all of our residents, all of our visitors want, right? And so when in that is making sure that they're able to flush their toilets and they're able to go to visit a park and they're able to, go to that art exhibit. So really, as I'm looking at Chris, who is our co-chair of the Economic Vitality Commission, we could talk about everything. Everything's important in that wheel. And so we're really excited that we're here tonight to talk to you guys. So the plan really, again, is to make sure that we have a vibrant community. We had 3 themes in that. And so that's access to opportunity. And so that's making sure that businesses, whether they're a startup entrepreneur, they're from whatever background, have access to opportunity here. So that's making sure, I call it the meat and potatoes of our work, is getting them resources to technical assistance for businesses, making sure they're aware of other opportunities for assistance with exporting, importing, with everything from financing, marketing, whatever it may be, connecting them with peer groups, which is the next theme, is convene and catalyze. And so we bring businesses to have two-way conversations with the city. So actually next Thursday, we're doing a spring business open house, having city tables there for businesses to ask specifically, like, hey, I want to learn more about this, and I have a question or I have a concern. And so having that two-way conversation is really important. And then the third theme is leveraging Issaquah's assets. So when you think about Issaquah, you think about the great outdoors, think about our creative industries. We love those things, but we haven't really wrapped our arms around those as businesses really try to focus on. Like, let's help that industry, those industries grow, because in economic development, you want to build upon your assets, right? So you can get, you don't want to say, oh, I wanted to become just like this other city. We want to be who we are. Let's build upon those assets and try to really support the businesses that are here, and find out what other businesses or organizations need to be here to support those groups. And then the third part of that, leveraging our opportunities, leveraging our assets, is home-based businesses. So we have 2,600 business licenses in Issaquah. More than half of those are home-based businesses. So some businesses always want to be home-based. It's a hobby. I have it because I have to have it. Some businesses start up there and grow and want to take that next step to get out of the garage or whatever. And so we want to help anybody at whatever level they are. So we've done some specific workshops, partnering with a Startup 425 organization, doing co-working to really try to, again, come together, figure out what they need, and really help them make those connections and kind of get to the next level. So some of our projects this year, as we're partnering with the chamber to do business workshops in person. It's like brand new for us, it feels like. We've been working with outdoor recreation businesses to find out what type of support and coordination with other nonprofit organizations. We're working with the Issaquah Arts new organization around the creative industries aspect of working with artists to set up something small, but LinkedIn profiles so they can be part of the Issaquah Arts. So really, it's like, you're an artist, you're a business as well, and this work on this professionally, but then taking that next step to access resources there. And what have we achieved? We're going to be doing metrics in a month. So we are starting to work on these things and starting to spread our wings of trying to connect with other organizations throughout the region, because during the pandemic, we really grew strong ties with our East Side cities and organizations that serve businesses. And so building upon that and making sure that, when something is happening with our businesses in Issaquah that they can take advantage of in Renton or in Kirkland, they're aware of that. So kind of really expanding that. I do all right, Chris? All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just like a little love for all that stand and deliver story. Next, that was a great exercise in patient listening. And next, you're going to get to not have to patiently listen, but get a chance to talk and ask questions of our staff members. There was no good way. There was no good way to break these up. And in fact, Mayor Polly and I went back and forth a few times over how many groups do we have? We want to make sure that there's enough space and time, but also you get enough, you get enough exposure to a plan and a steward of that plan to really ask questions. And so we've split our our goal areas up into 3 pairs. And you'll see those around the room. So mobility and infrastructure, environmental stewardship and growth and development, and city leadership and services, and social and economic vitality. The folks that just presented out are going to move into those groups based off of the goal area that their plan maybe most feeds into. That is not an easy. There, in fact, in the packet, there are many slides to show you all the different connector dots that we have from. This is the main thing that it feeds into, and I think Susie gave a great explanation. It's like, well, it kind of touches all of these. Just looking at mobility master plan, well, it's largely about mobility. Mobility is also about the environment. Mobility is also about social and economic vitality. Mobility also feeds into, as was shared, transit-oriented development, so growth and development. It also impacts our infrastructure. And so there's no neat way to slice and dice it. But for tonight, we want to give you the opportunity to really dive into a few plans with those stewards. And so we needed to break out into a few different groups. I'm not gonna go through each one of these slides and talk about how each one of these plans, but to give you a general idea on the last one, it's this kind of mess. That if we really wanted to connect every plan to every goal area, you would have this sort of red yarn connecting things across the room. So we're trying to simplify that a little bit tonight. So the way that we're simplifying that is for this mobility and infrastructure group, we'll have mobility master plan, our utility plans, and our capital improvement plan in this corner over here. The climate action plan, housing strategy plan, and park strategic plan in the back corner over there. An economic development action plan, human services strategic plan, and I'll be there to sit in and talk about public safety and emergency management in that corner over there. What we tried to do is, and I actually didn't set myself up for this, but gosh, it was a good idea after the fact. At the end of our last meeting, you went around to each of these posters and you placed some dots next to either the goal area or particular objectives that you were interested in learning more about or had questions about that you wanted to learn a bit more about. And so what we did was our best to sort you into groups based on that interest. And so the way that will look tonight is in just a moment when I give you some instructions to get up and move. Our mobility and infrastructure group, you can see up here on the slide your name. The same with environmental stewardship and growth and development, and city leadership and services, and social and economic vitality. Some directions before you move. So the purpose of this time is to ask clarifying questions. It is not to do a review of these plans. They have been reviewed. The purpose of tonight is for you to build your understanding. So when we come back together next month, you're able to have a strong opinion about the revisions to the strategic plan based on what you learned tonight. So use this as a time to get that expert insight while the experts are here in the room, so you can feel informed to start having that conversation about revisions next month. Not a catch, we won't call it a catch, but in your groups, 2 things to be thinking about. When you come back, your breakout group is going to present out to the other 2 groups, specifically about what are the overarching themes that resonated with you from each plan. So thinking about your lived experience here in the city of Issaquah. What resonated with you? What sounded right? And what are the elements or the actions in these plans that you're seeing feeding into the recommendations that you might want to make to the strategic plan update? You'll have some time. You're going to have about 30 minutes to ask questions. And then you'll have some time with your group to start to think about, okay, well, what do we want to come back and share out to the group? So you're not going to just come back cold. You're going to have a little bit of time to talk in your small group first before you come back and share out full group. Any questions before I hope you have a lot of questions because I know I do from the last 30 minutes, but any questions of the process of how we're going to spend the next 30, 35, 40 minutes here?
Okay, the Post-its, we drop them off and run, right?
Drop them off and get the heck out of there. Yeah. Okay, I won't belabor the time. Please go ahead and move. Drop off your Post-its and head to your corner. Kelly, hold on for a second. I'm gonna give you some instructions.
Sounds good.
I didn't get it. So. I was out of town till today, and I didn't want to do that either, so
That's fair.
that's on me.
No,
it's on me.
And I would say, anytime that you're like, if you're coming in, it's not always something ahead of time. Anytime you're coming in, just call us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly, I think the best way to do this is for me to have you call me, and I'm gonna place you in the corner with the group.
Okay.
I-
Like,
No, I think I'm just gonna have you phone call me.
okay. So I'm in Canada and
Oh, no.
it costs like
No, then you're
a
not
lot.
gonna you're not gonna phone
So
call
I'm
me.
not gonna call you. Yeah.
You're not gonna do that. I'm gonna have your group actually move over around you, which is gonna be a little weird, but I think the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Okay, give me a second to ask them to move.
I mean, I could.
I remote myself.
I love your right hand, but it's on the deck.
We have a public safety.
I thought my phone.
But just be right here.
Oh, no, I'm here, but.
I am about your.
We're actually gonna have a contagious investigators.
Oh.
So as long as you're near this nice school.
I just want to
exist.
That's just cool.
So cool.
And Dale, is this intent, like, is it free or are we all wanting to like have it so everyone hears all everyone's questions?
I would say, you want to be, you want to use the time wisely, but I mean, if it feels like someone's really wants to know about environment, and really wants to talk to Stacy, and you really want to talk to me, then it's totally fine. The only thing that I would ask is, Kelly, you're gonna have to just shout at who you want to talk to if that's the case, because it won't be quite as. But I know it's like weird to be close, but just given that Kelly can hear you through this.
Yeah, I can hear everyone perfectly fine.
Okay, great.
Kelly, use the mic.
Where that plan be located?
Right over in that.
Yeah. What are the next steps?
So there are.
It's gonna be, wasn't really addressed, it's just something we want to go back
On by
to.
us. Do you have to have connection with the small business owner that help them get this money for their business to survive? And so realize a lot of the trusted advisory, trusted advisors now model, and so King County are, created a community business type program, hired and trained.
No, we just need to get them to move closer to her.
Yeah, so I think I can hear like anyone in the room that's talking. So I'm hearing someone talking about like small businesses. Yeah. So it's hard to hear like the specific one.
Sorry, Kelly, it's gonna be a challenge, but we'll do what we can. Just let us know if, like, I don't know if we can talk out, but.
Which is kind of tied with housing, because we have, one housing business requires so much structured parking. So the analysis showed that the development feasibility has not, it doesn't consider. So we need to kind of figure that part out. What's the right flexibility, still meet the vision of the city to get housing on the value floor. So what are the barriers? So we really need to understand, is it because it's long leases? Redevelopment is more expensive than building free land. People are getting leases from there. Is it bad? Is it high water table? Nobody's gonna go there. And there's parking. Is it cost of that, so we need to understand a whole lot of barriers. Particularly for housing, it'll be focused on diversity of housing types, how to create that. There are some incentives, there are some barriers that we need to remove and all of that. So, whether it's part of that.
Fear of like.
So with housing, you think about a distribution of housing over cost of a unit, a housing unit, whether it's an apartment or condo, single family house. Are we looking at that? Do we have any targets that say, you know, we want that distribution to match the population in terms of income distribution?
So the county did this assessment at the region wide.
Yeah.
You know, and they said the need for 50 to 80% average median income is this much bar. You know, that's the greatest need. Or is it below 30%? So you see,
50 to 80%
is one group, and then 30 to 50, and then below 30. So they've taken our growth targets, say 3,500 units till for the next 20 years. The biggest need is in that lower brackets. And that's true for any city. That's true for the whole region.
So over the last, say, 10 years, shortage of housing has sort of pushed everything into the higher brackets, right? Because I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's the
correct me if I'm
market.
wrong,
That's how
the market is like inflating faster than. And so the problem is getting worse. Do we have any kind of strategy that is sort of robust against those market forces and maintaining a supply of housing at lower?
Yeah, so it's a combination, it's a bundle of incentives, right? So right now we have in our Central Valley floor, most of our designated growth is there, but if you don't get any housing units built there, you're not going to get any, you're not going to solve the affordable housing. So trying to figure out, okay, is it a supply and demand issue? We need to tackle it from supply. So if you get more units built, maybe the market will decline, right? So as long as the pressures, you never, that's a region wide. That's not just Issaquah Park. That's just. But then when we have regulations to say, you know, the developer provided housing is X%, but it doesn't make them pencil out for the developers, then what can we tweak so that it does work for the developers so they can build the housing? So one of the strategies is increase developer provided housing. So if you're building a 300 unit apartment and we say you need to build 30% as affordable, it won't work for them and they won't build anything. So right sizing the percentage that we can get from the private market side is important. So understanding what those economics are. Then incentives wise, what can the city provide and bring to the table? So one of the tools is multifamily tax exemption. So you don't pay taxes if you give 20, the state law allows this. So the council had discussion and debate on that. If you provide 20% at 80% average median income, then you can, get some tax exemptions. You don't have to pay taxes for 12 years. And then can we get permanent affordability? Because the last thing you want to do is get someone in and then at the end of the year, you have nowhere to go. So
we're driving towards Arch
we do participate in Arch. The city's part of the regional housing coalition that provides the resources for us to understand, what is this work? They help us with implementing the covenants. So there are about 800 affordable units out of 17,000 in the city that meet that, affordable housing standard. But most of them we got through development agreements. So then there are covenants that you have to restrict on the property. So implementation of all of that, Arch helps us with that. The city support the money, they give the money to Arch. Issaquah did pass the levy, our council did pass the levy, a 1/10 of 1% tax increase that can go towards affordable housing. There was like, if we pass it or King County passes it, if we beat King County, then we can keep it. So we did do that and we got the money. And so I think part of that was council to figure out what happened with that money. How can we best use it within the city limits? Or build partnerships so that we can get some of the it's a complex problem.
It is a complex problem. I want to ask a macro question,
Yeah.
Which is, does anybody have sort of an overall strategy that leads to there being enough housing at the right price points for the population that already lives here. Because anybody said, if we do this, then we'll solve the problem.
It's not one thing.
I don't think that's a one.
It's not a one thing.
It's not a
it's
one
a-
city.
it's a bunch.
That's like a regional. That's like a.
But there is, if you want to talk about it on a one-off, so we can get to other questions, there is a pioneer programs that are implemented in each cities. So I can tell you right now firsthand that some of the commissions, mine included the Economic Vitality Commission, we've made recommendations with planning policy on the new, on a revision of the pioneer plan, which is similar to what Minnie was saying as far as incentivizing developers. That building so many units, it has to do with so many units that I can probably get you some of that information. Is there a plan? Yes, but it's everlasting. There's not a perfect answer for it. Like, yes, we would like to have this much affordable housing. But then again, the developers are gonna look at what's in their pocket. The city's also gonna look at in return, okay, does that meet our plan? So make both of them meet. That's why it's gotta be a longer, complex.
Well, it sounds like there's a couple of different ways to approach this. One would be, we want to achieve pie in the sky of like, there is enough housing for everybody.
Right.
Another would be, we want to be the most effective we can be under the constraints to improve the problem. And it sounds like we're shooting for the latter in the strategic plan. Is that right?
Strategic.
Sorry, in the housing.
In the housing action plan, yeah, there are 9 different strategies. So I think, yeah, we're trying to get, transit-oriented development project done. We're trying to figure out what are the barriers for condo ownership, right? Because if you keep getting more rental housing, people aren't going to build your equity at all, and so you're exacerbating the affordability problem because people will always never be able to build equity from that standpoint because that's majority of Americans build well, equity is in their home ownership. Traditionally, not to say that, or stock market or whatever the case may be, but how do we do that in a way that provides housing for everyone? Communities thrive when there's places for everyone. If you want a restaurant person to work and live here, you need a place for them to be here. Yeah.
On that, I've been reading some things lately that say that one of the most underappreciated and under-implemented strategies, if you will, or tactic, to make a differentiation between a strategy and a tactic to address the work, access, live, is greatly increased efficient public transportation so that people don't have to live where they work, that they can get to work, get home, get back to work, absolutely predictably at a very sustainable cost or no cost. Does that, how does that?
Absolutely. So the land use and housing and transportation are joined in the same place.
Right, that's.
So I think the city's planning efforts are to get housing on the valley floor, to get the light rail station here. Again, it's more complex than that because light rail will only connect these dots. You still want people to come from Kent to here to Redmond, and how many people are still relying on their cars. But getting good transportation.
I'm thinking more buses than anything else. And what the stuff that I've read said, forget light rail because it's not going to happen within decades for those communities that happens, which almost everyone does. But increasing bus service, even if they're small buses that run on a regular basis that people can count.
Correct. Something major needs to change up there. So we have the new shuttle program that connected, Tallis and other communities down to the valley floor. It's a pilot project. The city spent $200,000, got some from Metro. We hope there's ridership so we can continue to advocate and support for that. We lost a lot of transit connections here because of COVID. The Metro's revenue shrunk. Those are big buses. I mean, that's more complicated issues because there's the union of the bus drivers. The smaller buses, you see empty buses drive by, but like how much does it cost? Then getting smaller buses to make better connections. There are other opportunities like, the partnerships between Metro and so you could get like Uber and connections because even though no matter you can get some transit, but you still need your last mile, first mile connection to get to them.
Yeah.
So,
Kelly was asking about percent AMI for the affordable properties for the 800 out of the 17,000.
I don't know out of the top of my head.
Okay,
I can
Monica, I heard Monica
Talking
talking
like
over
0
there.
to 80%.
It was 80 or 150.
I think we have some for like Leo homes and things that are on the lower affordability piece, so I don't know exact breakdown. I can look into that.
Kelly, could you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay.
Oh,
No problem.
Kelly, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I was gonna ask, so just in terms of like different buckets of funding for affordable housing, there's like the developer impact fees in some cases that goes into like the housing trust fund. But also I think, at the state level, there's policies that are like, oh, you can get, like higher zoning if you have a certain percentage of units as affordable for X percent of AMI. So I'm curious, like, what the kind of like how those levers kind of compare in terms of how many units you're expecting to result out of, these different actions, essentially, like based on, any models or whatever that the city has.
Sure. On a couple of things. So the impact fees, we don't charge the affordable housing units impact fees. So that's an incentive from the city that they get a waiver, make up that difference from the general fund for the delta difference that we don't have the developers pay for the impact fees, transportation, parks, and so on. The other, I think you were saying was, the Arch Trust Fund. So the city contributes towards the Arch Trust Fund. Different cities provide that trust fund, and then they match it. So the State Housing Trust Fund has certain allocations they get from the federal government. Then these cities get pulling in their resources, can fund, because each city can build a unit for $300,000 or whatever we give every year. But collectively, we can go after the bonds, we can fund some larger projects. So Arch then evaluates different projects that can get that funding. So that trust fund. There's the State Housing Trust Fund that provides some funding that gets bundled up. Did that answer? What was the other third? Did you have?
Yeah, so just to confirm, so the affordable housing you're referring to, it's like housing that is income restricted or has like, it's like the price is restricted?
Yes.
To a certain extent? Okay.
So there would be a covenant that would say, you still build equity because you own it, but it doesn't appreciate at the same time as a market rate unit would.
Yes.
So, but you have to qualify for it if you make, say, 80% area median income. That equates to 4 people in a 4 people household. It depends on how many people are in your household, for about $117,000. If you had a family of 4 and your income is $117,000, that's 80% of the area median income. And that comes from housing urban development. I mean, those are not, we have to adopt those, brackets.
Sorry. Kelly, did you have anything more? Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I guess like my other follow-up to that is like, so the 800 out of 17,000, that's only referring to like covenant restricted, like subsidized housing, whereas there's probably some other units out there that like in, the housing space they call naturally occurring affordable housing because the rents are like less than a third of income for people earning like 80% AMI. Do we have good stats on that and any like plans to, increase that type of housing, or is that something that the city has like less control over?
Yeah, no, one of the strategies was to look at naturally occurring affordable housing. So the city did do an inventory of where if you have an older housing stock, not too much exists in Issaquah, but you also don't want to lose that because then you're displacing that and, by another larger, bigger, fancier project and then there's fewer. So I think we have an inventory and strategies to deal with naturally occurring affordable housing, and the city can provide incentives for, say, you can upgrade your decks if it's an apartment complex and you won't have to pay for this. So that deals with special policies and things. So yes, we do have an inventory of that.
About 8 to 9 more minutes. Lots about housing. These two
I don't know which one this fits into, but I see down there salmon habitat health. And there was a massive 3-page article in the Seattle Times Sunday about the total dysfunction of the plan to improve salmon habitat by addressing the culverts, specifically addressing culverts. Where do we stand on that? I don't know. I don't even know which one of you would be.
I can touch on it. I've been working a lot with Public Works on this one. They're taking the lead. So that project.
Of course.
Yeah, but that
Sorry, I
project.
didn't mean to.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good. That project is being overseen. That specific culvert project is WashDOT.
Yeah.
So Washington State DOT.
Even inside,
Yes.
inside the city?
Yes, so DOT identifies all the, it's a court decision.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, you know all about that. So yeah, WashDOT, in fact, right now is working on, there's 5 specific passages under I-90 that they are addressing. Public Works is leading that. We in Parks are working with a number of them that address our park property.
Yep.
Sammamish Cove Park is.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
So specific to.
Very specific. So I could, Tibbetts Creek, Schneider Creek, West Valley Creek, Issaquah Creek, and, oh man, there's a 5th one. Dang, I was so close.
Laughing Jacobs, that's what
Doesn't go under I-90. Evans Creek. There we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, WashDOT, I mean, do you have a specific question?
No,
about the project?
I'm just so stunned by the, I don't know.
It's
The status quo, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it's.
I think the point was that, that's right.
Yeah. No, big project. Does it answer everything? Does it address every barrier? No, it doesn't. But I think specific to Issaquah, what I know about those projects, that I-90 is a huge barrier.
Yeah.
A huge barrier. And quite frankly, I mean, I can't speak to the other cities, but when you look at those 5 creeks and their relationship to Lake Sammamish, improving fish passage under I-90 for those specific Issaquah projects, it's gonna be a pretty sizable benefit. It really will.
Stacey, I had a question for you that I kind of know the answer to, but could you describe, one of the reasons I ask is right now our strategic plan focuses on what citizens can do to mitigate environmental impacts and climate change. In the climate plan, how would you describe the breakdown between like the actions that we're taking there and who the people taking those actions are, like city versus public versus other stakeholders?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and the strategic plan doesn't really capture much around the ICAP system. Before, we've been trying to report on the ICAP within our quarterly reporting to council and kind of fit it in, but it doesn't fit nicely. I think community members, the city businesses are kind of the big players. That doesn't capture everyone, like all the other public entities, but those are kind of the 3 big buckets where behavior change or major changes are need to be made, like for buildings.
Yeah.
Is that kind of?
Well, I think I'm sure you don't know this answer, but like, is it a third to each one of like, what is I'm just curious, like in terms of what we've decided we need to do.
Yeah.
What is the breakdown of who needs to take action for those?
Right, yeah, we don't call that out in this version of the ICAP. I think that's something we'll dig into with the revision, but we do know in general, about 40% of emissions are coming from home and from individual behaviors. So there's a lot we can be doing in terms of behavior change and providing incentives to community members and other resources.
Question on that. As far as future development, we talked about housing. Is there something in the plan that you're working with developers for future projects to say they have to be LEED compliant?
Yeah, we've already taken some of those steps. I think, through the Title 18 update, we passed a LEED goal or LEED Platinum standard if they're over 10,000 square feet. The new state building code, the city just passed last week. Council approved.
And that it's not a natural gas ban, but it is, my understanding is it is challenging to build new with fossil fuels unless you're taking a whole bunch of other mediation for those emissions. So I think there's a lot happening with the new. The most challenging piece for us is the existing buildings. So
Is what?
existing
Oh, yeah.
buildings.
Yeah,
So yeah, we have, a couple programs.
So, how much, if any, cooperation does the city of Issaquah have on this subject with the Issaquah School District? Because the reason I ask that is that I've been a docent down at the hatchery since the Friends group was formed. And I have never seen a child standing there in front of the windows with some adult who makes some erroneous statement. And because the kid has that as part of the science curriculum in the school district, you said, no, Dad, that is a hatchery fish. It's a coho, whatever.
Yeah.
So I've seen firsthand the influence that children can have on their parents.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, great question. I chuckled because the environmental board had a long discussion on this last night. We had some students that want to pass a sustainable policy with the school district. So they came and talked to the board last night.
Great. That answers it almost.
Yeah, I think there's, in terms of the work we're doing, our program's developed a really good relationship with the district over the last couple of years. We're working with them on their building, energy efficiency, supporting them with renewables. We're gonna start talking about kind of shared charging opportunities. They're involved in a resilience program. We're helping get composting back in the school. So I think there's a lot of great programming in terms of within the classroom.
Yeah.
We have a student group, which were some of the students that came last night, that are working on curriculum. How far that's adopted, I think that's part of what they want to push with them.
You could read between the lines, though, if the kids are coming and putting together support for creating a policy, there might not be enough happening.
I just want to observe something. When I was on the development commission, the high school was being redone, and we spent more time talking about student parking lots than we did on structure. And the numbers that we got about students that are school, one person. So that's trying to get the students to go, yeah, well, the rest of it's good, but don't make me write a bus.
So,
They do promote the riding the bus. My kids
They do,
went to the
yeah.
school district, so they have like 1 week, like really promoting that. My kids always, because we never could drive them and stand in line to pick them up. But they have zero waste Wednesdays. And so my daughter, who are adults now, but she would come and make us compost because she learned it from her classroom. But to this day, we compost. Thank you. Because she
You must not have bears in your yard.
So I have a real hard time figuring out how much impact these actions actually have. And so we have a goal of 95% reduction of greenhouse gas by, 2050?
Yeah.
Which of the things are going to impact that the most, and how much are they going to impact?
That's a lot of what the environmental board talks about. So the way the current plan is written, we don't have those metrics attached to the actions.
So they're like, was it 1, 2, or 3 leaves?
Together.
And that seemed to
Yeah, so that's something I think will be a really in-depth conversation with our next update, but we know it's buildings and transportation are big things.
You know, someone comes to the council meetings, they see.
Yes.
He talks about the restaurants not doing,
Yeah.
I don't know how much.
You can stay where you are.
Percentage impact.
Stay where you are.
I've seen him come to like multiple. council meetings.
Stay where you are, but I'm gonna give you some instructions. Stay where you are, but I'm gonna give you some instructions. Okay, we've almost got everyone. I'm really not using any of my teacher techniques because I'm trying to treat us like adults.
It's a water bottle, you throw it.
I know, I could just chuck it. Okay, so I've got 2/3 of this group. 2/3 of the group. I've got 2/3. Wow. Now we've got all three. You're gonna stay where you are. You're gonna use the next 10 minutes, and of course, it kicked me out of Teams right when I was gonna direct you to the questions on the screen. But this is your group right now. This is your group focused on these 2 goal areas. And so you're going to take the next 10 minutes in this group to prepare to come back to the full group and give a very short share out of what you learned. what are your, and it's not like, here are the 7 things that I wrote down. What are the themes of what you learned about the plans in these goal areas? And what are you already starting to think about how that might inform your emerging recommendations when we come together next month? What are the themes of what you're taking away from learning about these plans, and what are the ways it's already informing the recommendations that you might want to make when we come together next month? So you're going to have 8 minutes in your group to talk about that. And it's probably gonna be more like 6, because I'm gonna start telling you at 6 that we're done to shake, to get us back here ready to share out. So you've got about 6 minutes, and then we're gonna come back together and share out. I will put the questions up for those that are more visual, but I have to get back into Teams to be able to do that. So 6 minutes.
Big goals.
I think a big theme I heard was affordable housing.
Yeah.
Right? Affordable housing. And another one would be the environmental impact, of course, of the development that is scheduled out in the future, right? Yeah, what I heard anyways, in my opinion, resonating.
And one thing too, we did talk about.
May want someone to take notes so you're ready to share.
I got you.
Chris.
I think we also talked about the mobility plan and how that affects affordable housing or not. And what are the ties there? How do we measure the importance of that? I believe that was one
Proximity,
thing.
the proximity of.
Yeah, well, yeah. Just one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the affordable housing, like, that was a theme, I think, to talk about, like, what we talked about or what I learned was more that it sounds like it's a really challenging problem and we haven't really found things that are working at scale. And so, I mean, I think that's one thing for me is like, that seems like an area that we like potentially needs more focus, or that we, just need to revisit, because it seems like it's just such a complicated problem. And that was clear from what Minnie was saying, but I think that, I don't know if other people felt that same way, but that was.
There's an element of we're constrained in our ability to solve both the housing problem and the environmental.
Yeah.
Problems. So some of those constraints are legislative, I guess, in that.
So how to focus on to actually make a difference, kind of thing, right? For all of these, whether it's through transportation and connection with that, whether it's funding, policy goals, but actually have an outcome. Gets us.
Well, that can lead into how would you, what would be a solution that you would recommend to alleviate?
Yeah, so I'm still going back and forth as to whether the strategy should say, given the constraints, we do this, or whether it should say, well, this is what we're trying to achieve, trying to get around these constraints, or eliminate the constraints. So I don't know which one I would recommend, but that's sort of an open question.
Yeah, and I guess one question I have is like, is it the housing strategic work? What's the name of the document? That's a plan that I've heard of. A lot of these other plans, I don't hear about this plan as much. So I am curious, like, is there, and we didn't get time to ask and go, but like, is that current? Do we feel like that is where it needs to be? The other thing that I think a lot of what we talked about was incentive based, like how do we incentivize affordable housing? We just did a land use update that didn't really address this in other ways, like through zoning or anything else. So I don't know if we're evaluating other options, but that's something, it sounds like we're mostly focused on incentive based, trying to get developers in the existing places that they can develop with that sort of density that we are, that support the type of housing as big development plans and affordable housing units that come along with it. So that's one thing that it sounds like that is, and I don't, many of you, tell me if that's not the case.
Done in 2017. We're going to redo this in after comprehensive plan update is finished, so 2025.
Oh, there is a planned update, okay.
So it seems to me that one of the biggest areas of improvement for this whole thing is communication on how these things interconnect. And I'm talking communication to the citizens and businesses and taxpayers here. And this is all fantastic stuff, but to expect a taxpayer to understand how the parks program ties into affordable housing is, I think, whatever we can do to expand on a continuing basis in layman's terms, how our various strategies link up to maintain and improve the quality of life in this part is absolutely, I mean, I'm a communicating guy, or I used to be. And, you know, the problem with communication is the illusion it occurs. And I am constantly stunned by how many of my neighbors don't know anything about the city. And they're IT people. And so they could, you know, and it's not a criticism of the communications person, but I love all of this, but I feel like it's.
About 1 more minute. So you're ready to come back and share out.
That's spot on, because, you know, someone was telling me today, there's a Reddit page, there's an Issaquah Reddit page, which is online forum. And there was more buzz about Burger Master than there was about light rail planning. Which had been
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I think maybe applying that to one of the themes we talked about, which was like climate and the way that the climate action plan might differ from the current strategic plan framing is like the number of stakeholders that are involved and how, I mean, my read of the current strategic plan just doesn't capture the different stakeholders that need to be involved for us to be successful. And so that to me feels like in the current climate action plan, that is very much the focus and not currently the strategic plan.
I'd also say that the communication aspect is really one way that you get around some of the constraints or you address some of the constraints, because there are a bunch of these things the city can't solve on its own. It needs the citizens to solve it.
Yep.
But having the strategy include those elements where we say, we need to solve it, this is what it looks like to see.
If you want to
do it.
finishing up their themes, getting ready to come back. About
An observation I'm hearing too, that there is an intertie between these goals. The intertie is how they support one another, but also it's helping to acknowledge they sometimes compete against one another.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, everybody's competing.
And not that that's a, everybody's, and that's not a negative. It's like, there's healthy conflict, right? Conflict is probably the better word, right? But like anything, you always have to acknowledge that sort of tug and pull, right? Growth and development goals and environmental stewardship are at times they're.
Yeah, or low cost housing, it doesn't always include, copious environmental.
First step of addressing is sort of acknowledging that.
The water quality from parking lots is,
Okay, we are gonna come back to our seats to be ready to share out what we learned and what we're taking away.
Yeah, that's one.
Oh, you got the notes, Chris, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Our growth and development,
It's gonna be a challenge, I got it.
It's doing great. Returning to their seats. And mobility and infrastructure. Returning to their seats. And our city leadership and services group is also coming back to the table. We got about, again, 60% compliance at this point. No, I don't want to say something that's very efficient. Thank you. Staff, you do not need to stick around for this last bit of time. You have given us an incredible amount of entertainment. If you want to, if you have a, this will also be recorded. I mean, it is being recorded, so you can watch it later if you want. For this last little bit of time, we're going to share out a bit of what we heard, what themes emerged, And what are you already, what already seems like it's emerging as something you want to talk more about when we think about the revision to the objectives within each goal area? There is no particular order, but I want to save at least 4 minutes for every group to share out. And so whomever would like to start us off, just make sure you let us know who your group is. It'd be great if you could volunteer by tipping up your name tag. Because we're practicing that. So Katie's gonna kick us off.
We kind of came first in order of the presentation, so you might as well just get it roll that way. So we had the master mobility plan, utility, and capital improvement plan, but the two goal areas were infrastructure and mobility. And anyone from my group, please jump in if I missed something. One of the things that the big themes was that maintenance isn't necessarily sexy or exciting, but deeply important. And that while aspirational plans are very important, we also need to make sure that they are likewise operational. When we are thinking about our objective action items and success measures. And so that was the theme that came out, that's something for all of us to keep in mind. That it is more expensive to neglect something and then have to do a large improvement than it is to make annual improvements or improvements over time. But every once in a while, there is a need for a large improvement. Is there anything that I missed?
So one other thing, well done, Katie, the idea that the city continually has well-baked plans, because again, to a certain extent, Washington State Department of Transportation, different agencies ultimately are the underwriters. And they basically have a big say of what happens. So whether it's Sound Transit or whether it's particular roads. So when the city comes for Sound Transit with a well-baked plan, not only do the agencies, not only we're able to influence the agencies, but ultimately it's a way to kind of sway them to do what we want them to do. Again, not a perfect picture, but when the city's prepared, whenever having to deal with those agencies, it's very helpful for us getting what we want as a city.
Great. Any other mobility and infrastructure thoughts? Yeah, Joe.
I suppose another little point that we briefly discussed was about the success measures and how they don't necessarily fully encapsulate all of the underlying performance metrics that the city collects. And we also want to, we'll probably talk more in detail about this, but like operational versus aspirational aspect of both the mobility aspect and the infrastructure aspect, and particularly the infrastructure aspect about it's kind of light in nature, and so but that's because of the fact that it kind of encapsulates all the other goal areas, and so that's, we kind of heard from staff that they kind of appreciated that was that light.
One other thing that came up in our group was that the master mobility plan had come out shortly after COVID, and so it was very oriented towards learning from COVID or anticipating changes in behavior associated with the pandemic. And so it's sort of the other side of, the strategic plan was the original was done before we had the learning from COVID, and then some of it seems that maybe that plan is a little bit over indexed or is really focused on that. And so how do we, use those actions, but also recognize that that it may have, now we have more information about.
Awesome. Thanks, M&I group. Let's go with growth and I'm just calling on you. Let's go with growth and development and environmental stewardship.
All right, I will go. So looking at the overreaching themes that resonated within our group was affordable housing. Everybody was really asking a lot of questions about affordable housing, the clarity on AMI, the average median income in order to provide affordable housing, the land for that affordable housing, Mobility and transportation also came up with that as far as how do we get people around once we get these wonderful houses built, even if we can't afford them, right? So that was another big impact. Another theme that came out around environment was obviously the salmon. Is a big, big thing for Issaquah. We have a couple of, projects that are coming up in the near future around the I-90 corridor, on the I-90 specifically with the culverts that are going to go in. So what's the impact to transportation mobility? And again, development. How do developers get that? That was a common theme. Another theme was keeping the environmental plan intact with the Clean Air Act with as far as the buildings being in compliance. It's not the future buildings that are so much of a challenge as the existing buildings. So a theme was how do we take care of those existing buildings to get to compliance of the Clean Air Act that we want in the future. Some of the elements of action plans that we plan on is one is how do you acknowledge conflict amongst the plans to better communicate within each other, right? That's the big task because some of those get in their way, right? Whether it's state driven, city driven, it doesn't matter. They're all conflicting. So maybe an action plan would be the better verbiage to understand how they intertwine and they're going to work together. Another one would be to clean up, obviously, the affordable housing plan. What is that? I know there's been different projects around that, but what is the clear picture of the affordable housing? It doesn't seem like there's a really set plan by the city for affordable housing. And then from there, it's just how to maintain those plans to consistently communicate to me the environmental impact along with the mobility and transportation plans together. Did I cover that? Okay.
Let me jump in just real quick.
Yeah.
One of the commonalities among some of these plans is that they're constrained, right? We have this idea of what it means to really solve a problem, and then we have this idea of like what we think we can solve as a city. Those aren't the same thing. So one is significantly constrained from the other. So for housing, we want everybody to be able to have a house, but we rely on developers to build the houses, and the developers have limits to what they're going to build.
And so they incentivize.
And similarly, on reducing greenhouse gas, we have these targets. We say we'll reduce 95% of it by 2050. We have limits as to how much impact as a city. And part of this could potentially be solved by things like communicating, outreaching to the community, broadening our impact through others, acting as a coordinating body.
Yeah, just a couple of additions on, I think one on the climate side, one of the things that we talked about was, if you look at the current strategic plan, climate is only, it's basically on citizens to go out and impact climate, and that there's actually a lot more. If you look at the climate action plan, there's a lot more stakeholders that need to contribute. And so I think making sure that we represent all of the important stakeholders that need to take action for something to be successful. I think that also, in a more confusing way, came out of the housing affordability. Like, I think that was, at least my takeaway was like, it seemed like what we were doing isn't working and we don't have really a clear plan there. Whereas I think with the climate action plan, there's a clear sense of like, we need to go execute against a current plan. The housing side felt more like we're kind of grasping at straws a little bit or trying to figure out, but haven't found a solution yet. So those seem like some other things that stood out.
I agree with everything that was just said. I would add, though, that I think, and I've alluded to this privately, but the level of knowledge of the citizens of Issaquah on how their government works, and it's not the city's fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's people that, quote, don't have time to look at a website. I'm sorry, I just don't understand this. But I think the city, on all of these things, needs to step up its efforts to alert people to the availability of the information and to update the information on everything from taxes, how these things are affecting their lives more frequently. And it's a huge challenge, in my opinion, but to explain how all of these groups are working together to the benefit of the city is we think, really important, and it's not there. People don't understand it. But if we're going to talk about reviews of the comprehensive plan, part of that or that discussion or effort has to be on how all of these organizations work together, the city.
Communication.
Yep.
It's a big, and Randy with the second excellent transition of the night brings us to our last group, city leadership and services and social and economic vitality.
Any thoughts? Volunteer to do the share out?
Okay, I got one. Oh no, it's time's over.
Say by the bell.
So, just real quickly, we had the economic development, we have the human services, and we have city leadership along with public safety on that. And so the big themes around there was in the economic development, and please, the rest of the group jump in. But it was basically engaging numerous local businesses and local sources, and the opportunity there lies within. So working with a lot of different organizations about what brought them here, what's sustaining them here, and trying to understand a little bit more about that. From a human services standpoint, also with the economic development, a big theme was around the cultural. And the cultural kind of fit within all of the stuff that we were talking about, from public safety to human services to economic development, because while we may have 60% white, we have a huge, if I heard that correctly, 40,000, 60% white, 40,000 in minorities and or different cultures. And that those cultures, how are we going and effectively helping them to drive their businesses, small businesses, all that kind of stuff. So from a human services standpoint, the big thing there was a focus on the homelessness and making sure that they're connected with the right types of things from the food bank, there's a 911 service with the police to help with behavioral things that are not criminal associated. So how do we help them from a human services standpoint in understanding, and to this gentleman's point, showcasing all of the different things that we have and that we are continuing to do, not only for all of our residents, but from a cultural standpoint too. So the things that people can get to, the learnings from the pandemic and things like that. And then from a city leadership, it was really around affordability, community engagement, along with the police. We talked a great deal about how during the pandemic, the police department, the lack of recruiting, not lack of recruiting, that's the wrong word, but we had a huge downshift in the number of employees within our department. And now the problem is that we're starting to evaluate and bring in more people, and it's working. We're almost at 100% capacity, but we're looking at the things that we're doing from cultural standpoint, broadening the impact of our police force, making sure that they understand the kind of community that we have, and housing came up for them, right? So those were the three major themes that we had within each one of those areas. Anyone else?
Yeah, from the business perspective, is how do we engage them to give them access to the resources that the city has available for them to make them succeed? And then from the human services perspective, it's helping the police through the availability of the services, and the response to homelessness was a big one. And then again, as Randy was mentioning, the community engagement part of it is probably something that needs to occur. It's a theme that we heard, not only we were discussing, but from everybody, like, we're trying to put the word out there, but it's not working. So how do we shift that paradigm to actually get people involved, right? I mean, should somebody from the city stand next to Jacob Tutris and talk to people? Because everybody goes there.
Well, as you remember, one of the objectives of this group is to have some recommendations about what does public engagement look like as we engage in this update beyond this task force. And so I think, Victor, that is a great question for everyone to be holding as we get close to closing out the night.
And part of clarifying to that, Dale, was when the gentleman was talking about parks, he said we had great engagement, 750 responses. And the first thing that hit my mind is we had 40,000 people living in our city. So is that really, that's less than 1%. So, I mean, you know, even less than that. I don't know what it is. Okay, I'm not a math guy. But how do we get, you know, that up to 2,500, right? Because then from a parks, from climate, from, you know, blah, 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 then maybe we can get some things done. So
Absolutely. A lot of new knowledge tonight, a lot of great questions. Some clarifying, some not so clarifying, but all great questions and things to be thinking about as when we meet again in April. And we'll really start to now look at each of these objectives with this wealth of knowledge that we've gathered and start to think about what of these might need to change. From your perspective as someone that lives in this community, works in this community, as part of this community, what might we want to think, what might need some revising? And so, again, there's not a right answer. There are only the ideas that this group has. But that's where we're going to start off when we come together on April 4th. You might leave here and have a million more questions, and that is totally natural and fine. You should send them to me, even though you talked to great people tonight. Let's not overburden me with your questions, but we'll make sure that we get answers to them before our next meeting. So if there's something you're thinking about that you're like, oh, I should have asked this, or like, I don't feel like I worded that correctly, please, you have my phone number, you have my email address. Let me know those questions so we can get those answered before we continue the conversation. And with that, I'll pass it back over to our chair.
Do we have any other business now, right now? Okay, any announcements from the group?
I will say that this was a very important meeting where I wish we maybe even had another hour to really talk about their priorities, what's working, what's not. In a perfect world, what could you do? So this meeting was substantial. And I wish we had a little more time, because I think that then drives all of our decisions, which then make the recommendations, which we'll be doing, and having a little more time, and maybe even switching the groups and getting, you know, is that the same impact that you guys had, you know, and doing something like that. So just a thought. Thank you.
All right, well, with that, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. Our next meeting is April 4th, back here from 6 to 8:30. And thank you all for your very enthusiastic engagement as we move a little closer to coming up with our recommendations. So y'all have a good night. I adjourned this meeting at 8:37.
Thanks, Kelly.